I'm not going to lie, I think there is a certain level of awkwardness. You know, being the person with dementia, I sometimes just feel sorry for the person who I'm communicating with. It's like I kind of feel like in their head, are they just thinking like, shit, what do I say? I think that's going to be the case for any time there's like a terminal illness, I guess. And maybe there's a bit to do with the type of illness it is as well. Maybe to a little bit. Like the awkwardness probably comes up a bit more, or there's even just various opinions and stuff come into it a bit more when you've got, you know, I think like cancer was, you know, a while back. It's definitely improved now in the community of how we view it. But I still think like dementia is still probably one that has a bit of a negative stereotype to it. But I don't think that's the big issue. I think the big issue is just people just generally just don't want to get you upset. It's amazing how it manages to come into everyday life though. Like the other day I work from home and I went to turn my computer on and I was typing my password to log in and it was saying, you know, fail or something, or rejected or something. And it wasn't because I was getting the password wrong. I know that you're probably all thinking that. So I ended up just calling IT. And they said, okay, type this thing in. So I typed it in. And they said, okay, now just restart your computer. Anyway, so I'm just trying to restart the computer. And I'd just done that momentarily before. I was trying to restart the computer. I'm pressing this button and the restart isn't there anymore. I'm thinking, geez, what's going on? Anyway, so I'm fiddling around. And it comes to a point where in that scenario, I just feel like I'm better off just telling the person. And I've just gone, hey, look, I've got Alzheimer's. Can you just give me a moment trying to figure this out? Because I kind of feel like it gives me permission to have space just to get my head straight in that moment. Otherwise, I'm feeling like they're thinking, oh, hurry up, mate, you're wasting my time. But I have to admit, in that moment, I kind of felt sorry for the IT guy when I said it, because I'm just thinking like, I feel like I've put him in an awkward situation. And I just don't think you can avoid that. I think it's going to have just very briefly, they'll have a moment of awkwardness. He done a great job though. All he said was, oh, yep, no worries, take your time. That's all he needed to say, and it was perfect. It just made me feel like, okay, cool, I've got space now. I can get my head right for a bit. I'll get there. I don't have to feel pressured in any way. I guess there's different scenarios in which it comes up. I sort of see it as like there's one group of scenarios that are around when I don't really, the person I'm talking to isn't my loved one. It might be a colleague from work who you're not particularly close with, or a friend who you're not particularly close with, or the IT guy. But I feel like in that scenario, there's nothing that you're going to say to a person with dementia, I think, that's going to be devastating, or it's going to be that bad that the person with dementia is going to get that upset by it, I would imagine, unless you're trying to be a prick. I just don't think you can stuff up that badly. Maybe it's a good point just to highlight too that it depends on the person. Some people with dementia will probably listen to what I'm going to say in this video and totally disagree with me. So if that's the case, let me know down below in the comments if you're in that scenario. And yeah, sort of share what your perceptions are. But this is, I guess, just coming from my views and the way I see things. Although I think there's nothing you can say that's going to be bad, I do think there's things that are suboptimal. And one thing that I think is definitely suboptimal is just trying to avoid the interaction. So let's say, in my example, when I told my work colleagues about my diagnosis, I told them just in a staff meeting, and so there's a whole bunch of people, and I did it over Zoom, because I hardly ever go into work. But that meant that the next time I have a meeting with someone, a colleague, it'll be the first time I've seen them since telling them about my diagnosis. And so one card they could play is just don't bring it up. We're having a meeting about something else, about work related. They don't have to mention anything about my diagnosis. I just think it does lead to you probably avoided the conversation because you don't want the awkwardness of it. But I kind of feel like it creates a bigger awkwardness, like it's that elephant in the room. And so I think you're better off just saying something about it. The one thing that I guess I would encourage you to say, here's like the answer, I guess, is you just say, hey mate, like I'm so sorry to hear about your diagnosis. That's crap. How are you going with it? That's all you need to do. Simple as that. And I feel like when people say that to me, I'm then left in a position of going, hey, what do I want to say? How much do I want to share? I'll be honest, usually I would just say, oh yeah, it's going all right. I'm perfectly fine. My symptoms are mild anyway, it's all right. If the person's a bit more closer to me though, then I might be a bit more honest. If I've had a crappy week or crappy few days, I might just say, man, like my head has not been in a good place this week with Alzheimer's has definitely affected me, but it just goes like that, has its ups and downs. It'll be all right. So that's the way I would usually handle that interaction. The other interaction though, which I don't think is the best way of doing it is, and this did happen a few times, was people would say, oh yeah, I have a terrible memory as well. And then they would give me examples of where their memory has failed. I think people probably do that because they're just trying to make you feel a little bit better and to make you feel like they could understand your situation. They can relate to it. I have to admit though, when I had that interaction, it did leave me just a little bit, just feeling a bit like you're kind of dismissing the gravity of the situation for me. I suspect they don't just hand out a diagnosis of dementia, especially with younger people, lightheartedly. I think it does take pretty significant issues that you're experiencing for you to get a diagnosis of dementia. And so they probably are experiencing symptoms more than what you are. So I feel like it's probably not the best approach to use. The next one, which I've got when sort of telling somebody, was that they said, oh, you should get a second opinion. And I think it's coming from a place of they're trying to make you feel better and give you, they don't. I think when there's a terminal illness, you just feel like it's bleak. Yeah, there's no, hey, you're going to get over this bad hump, and then things are positive on the other side. And so I think people just want to try and reach into that, hey, there's positive on the other side aspect as much as possible. And so I don't know, I assume that's what's going on in their head when they're doing that. I don't know, but again, this is just about that initial interaction that you're having with somebody. I think it's perfectly fine if you have more interactions with the person and then at some other point you think, hey, have you thought about getting a second opinion? Another one that sort of ties in with that one, sort of related in terms of trying to see a positive future, I think, is when people say, oh look, I've heard of people who last a very long time with dementia, that you could be going for another 30 more years or 20 more years. Again, I can see the good intentions behind it, and so I don't get upset with anyone. I don't get upset with any of these things that people say because I know they're coming from a good place. Again, unless they're being a prick. But I do feel like if they're being a prick, you probably already knew they were a prick beforehand. And so, when they're being a prick, you just sort of put it down to them being a prick. So you can take whatever they say with a grain of salt anyway. So, but I think for everybody else, I think when people come at it with, you could last a long time, it again it deviates from reality. I think that's another important point with all of this. I think there is an objective reality out there. If you get a diagnosis of dementia, there is a certain time span expected for you. Yes, there'll be some people who last longer, but there's also going to be people who last shorter. That's the reality of it. And so I think whenever you try and lean into a space that's, oh, look, I can find some examples over here, you deviate from reality. And I think I don't know, for me though, I feel like I just want the truth. I just want people to be not living in wishful thinking land. I just want, hey, this is the fact of the matter. This is the way it is. Yeah, it sucks, but that's the way it is. And what are you going to do about it? Again, that's probably just my mindset that I have. And so probably totally changes what I think is appropriate way of having that initial conversation with somebody. Another one is coming in with, again, in that initial conversation, coming in with a solution. If somebody's just told you that they've just been diagnosed with dementia, you don't need to jump in at that point and just say, oh yes, I've heard you can get really good outcomes by doing X, Y, and Z. You should definitely do that. I think being pushy on that topic, I would encourage you not to do that. I think it's, again, fine if you have if you've come across information you think is really valuable for somebody, I think it's fine to share it with somebody. I think that it just needs to be shared with them at a later date, and it could be shared in a way of going along the lines of, hey, I've came across this information. It's shown to have these outcomes, but I'm not an expert on the matter, and so if you want some information, I'm happy to give it to you if you want. And so I think with that, it then leaves the person with dementia with the autonomy to be able to choose the path that they want to do. So before I sort of talked about ignoring it, and then I think you can go the absolute opposite extreme, where I feel like sometimes people could possibly get a bit over the top and it comes across as feeling fake. And I think that occurs probably when it's that relationship when you don't have it's not your loved one. I think if it's your loved one, yeah, you're going to get some really extreme emotions and etc. But yeah, again, it's just about deviating from the truth. If that makes sense. Another one, which I actually haven't experienced, but I've heard people with dementia say they get it quite often. So I don't understand why, but why I don't get it. But actually, interesting why I don't get it. I hear people say, "Oh, you don't look like you have dementia." I haven't had that before. You don't look like you. I don't quite know what they're expecting a person to look like. I was speaking to a person who has dementia who said they experienced that, and their response apparently one time was, "Well, you don't look like you're ignorant." So that person clearly had enough of hearing that, I'm just realizing I'm becoming really critical of what people can say. That, again, I don't get down on it. I don't feel like it's really bad, but I'm really limiting the scope of what I think is acceptable, isn't it? I don't mean to scare you away. I don't want you to scare you away. I don't want you to avoid. I don't want you doing that tactic. I want you to be able to just communicate. But now I feel like I'm scaring everybody away with probably what I'm saying. Like I'm being too picky. So yeah, I'm not upset. I don't get upset by people's responses that much. I think it's more just a little bit of a tinge of, ooh, that didn't feel too right. That's all it is. So after that first sort of initial interaction that you have with somebody with dementia, then I think there's a level of frequency. So as a person with dementia, I don't want every single interaction I have with you from now on being about dementia. You don't have to bring it up every single time. I'm still a person before the dementia. It is nice every once in a while though, just to say, oh, how's your dementia going? Just bring it up every once in a while. It just makes me feel like you're a safe space that I don't have to hide it from if I'm struggling with certain aspects of life. I think everyone's a bit that way. If you're struggling in life with certain things, it's just nice to not feel like you have to hide it. And it's also nice to not have to feel like you have to explain it that much, but just having the opportunity so you feel like that person's comfortable enough that you can just speak about it and it doesn't have to be a big issue. All right, loved ones. I think loved ones are going to be different. I feel like when it's more acquaintances, I feel like you can, or you know, the IT guy, I think you can just do more generally accepted communication and it'll be okay for the most part. I feel like though with loved ones, it's different. Loved ones, it's going to be, you know, how do you usually communicate with that person? I just think you need to give them space. I think that's the main thing. Let the person, like I felt best when I had communication when the person just let me have space to be able to talk and not feel like I have to what's the word? You know, not when you not feel like you have to modify what I say because of how I think he might react. I think if I just feel like I've got space and I can talk how I'm feeling at that time, then you've kicked goals. One way of achieving that is to not jump in with your thoughts straight away. Let the person with dementia have space first to talk, and then you can come in with your thoughts. You know, it might be thoughts along the lines of, wow, I just didn't see that coming. I never would have thought that you had that. I think it's actually okay now. I think that the person with dementia also needs to accept that the person they're talking to, their loved one, will have their own way of responding and their own way of making sense of it all. And so I think it just takes both parties to be lenient on each other on how those early interactions are going to occur. At the end of the day, I think you need to recognise that if they are a loved one and they generally are looking out for your own best interest, then that's all they're doing. So whatever their response is, it's always going to come. It's coming from that space. And so just really keep that in mind. If you feel like somebody's, as a person with dementia, if I feel like somebody has said something which I disagree with, then I think it's important for me also to go, hey, they've also just heard some shit news about, you know, they're going to be left carrying all this shit at the end of the day when you get in your later stages. They're affected by this too, just as much as you are in a sense, even more in some ways. And so, yeah, I think it does take a bit of open-mindedness from the person with dementia, and that's when they're having those early conversations as well. If you've got ideas that you think, no, this is wrong, or you should be doing that, or whatever, I don't think there's much wrong with being able to say what you think, but I think the important part to remember is that the person with dementia may not be on the same timeline as you, and you might be thinking, oh, by now they're probably ready for it. It might be even just allowing and waiting for the person with dementia to bring it up themselves the next time, because they've heard what you've said, unless they've forgotten what you've said. That's the other. But give them way more time than what you think.
Daybreak, I'm already miles away, and there's nothing left to say.